What is going on, everyone? Happy Monday. I hope everyone's having an amazing start to your week. Just finished up with a 2-hour client kickoff call, which is always great. So what's going on? We're going to be talking SDR today. We're going to be talking culture today. We're going to be talking handoffs, methodologies, maybe a little bit. With my friend Nikki Ivey. So I'm really looking forward to this. I've known Nikki now for maybe 1.5 years or so. It's probably longer than that, but and I think not only is she a very vocal individual around the SDR role, she also is in the shit making it happen. So I love people who are kind of like the mix of like talking the talk and then also like getting it done as opposed to just talking about it. So I'm going to bring Nikki live. Here we go.
Hello, hello. What a very lovely intro you gave me. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. I'm just talking it up. I like that.
Thank you. I had to come correct for Jake.
I appreciate it. No, I'm looking forward to it. And when you sent me over some of the topic ideas, I think it really resonated with me. Meaning, I've really been thinking a lot about the customer experience and how, the SDR and the BDR, sales development rep, whatever they are really the linchpin of this, right? Like they're the first interaction, etc. With the customer, and it just feels like we really just, and not that individuals don't care about the customer journey or the customer experience, but at the macro level, I just feel like we're just completely ignoring it. It's like, this is the process we want to have happen, which is this qualification and this like very rigid, not fun handoff. So like just deal with it. But first here, before I get into it, maybe tell everyone a little bit about yourself. If you don't know Nikki, I don't know how you don't know Nikki at this point, you know what I mean? But if you don't know, maybe tell them a little bit about your experience, what you're up to now. And then I think, look, everyone, start dropping your questions. We're going to be talking all things, kind of sales development, sales culture, how these two things kind of weave together. So feel free to drop your questions in here as well too. But Nikki, do you want to give a quick who you are?
If you don't know, now you know.
That's right.
I have been in sales proper for just over a decade. Started out in retail, selling cars, slanging them whips, and it taught me a lot of the grit and some of the healthy cynicism that salespeople need to have, and so I'm grateful. But that environment was not, as you might imagine, was not conducive to me trying to raise a family. I do have 4 children. I joke and say I have several children because that's what it feels like. And working at a car dealership, it's these 12 hours days, and then it's including Saturdays, every Saturday, just wasn't it. And so, I mean, some of you may have heard me talk about this before. I sold a car to a gentleman. He's like, hey, you got something, and I think you might work. And you should meet my boss. And his boss is Scott Leese. I end up interviewing at Outbound Engine, and the rest is kind of history. Anyway, so I spent a lot of time this last half of that 10 years I talked about making mistakes and then cataloging what the themes were so that folks, who came after me didn't have to make those same mistakes. And then other than the mistakes, I did, gain a lot of insight, right? What was frustrating me as an SDR or as a salesperson, and how could I move those things out of the way for other salespeople and start this work of democratizing access to this profession that, can really be life-changing in terms of the finances for someone like me, who is a former teen mom, working these retail jobs and having to, again, work all those hours, to being someone who can work reasonable hours and have a much higher upside, right, to my income than I would have had spinning my wheels in those retail environments. And so all of that is sort of on my heart. And it's something that I'd like to evangelize more young moms and folks who come from less traditional and less represented backgrounds. To come into the profession. But we got work to do first, so that those folks are not only, welcome in terms of the culture, but so they're set up for success in terms of the processes and things that we ask of them.
Yeah, it's just there's just a perpetuated belief that software sales is so different than every other sale, and
Yeah.
so people from outside the industry couldn't possibly, have these skills, when in reality it's just bullshit. It's like there are parts of software sales that are completely different than other sales, but the core mechanics of discovery, how you position what you do, are universal, right?
Right.
Selling to outcomes is universal.
Exactly that. And here's how I know
Yeah.
that. Here's how I know that. After Outbound Engine, I went back to selling cars. I went to Drive Time, and I found that I was there for about 2 years, and I found that a lot of the process in terms of having a set number of phone calls or folks that I wanted to speak to in a given day, a compelling question I was going to ask those folks about a problem I was trying to solve, and being really intentional about how I was calling those folks to action. In the case of a car dealership, getting them to come down and actually sit in the car and talk to me. And so I saw a lot of transference of the skills between those two environments. So then when I was ready to go back into B2B, it was just like you're saying, right? There really was a blurred line, if any line at all, between the skill set. And so then it just became about the mindset working out.
So let's talk a little bit about the SDR or lead gen. So, if you don't mind, I mean, feel free in the comments, if you are in sales development or maybe you're an account executive, just kind of let us know maybe background, are you a closer, and your company? I think if you can drop it in the comments or, let us kind of know, we can take this conversation a few ways. But how did you get into, I would say evangelizing or getting more involved with that component of sales, right? So we're talking a little bit about the process side, but to maybe take it to like the beginning, how did you get into the top of funnel process, and why is that something that you feel like you kind of either gravitated, or maybe, I don't know, maybe you're thrust into it, I don't know, but like how did this become kind of a key, I guess, like rallying cry for you, the top of funnel?
So those early roles, like that Outbound Engine role, and even much later at Qualia, those are full cycle roles that I was in. And so you have to be a sales developer at the same time as you are a closer, or else it won't matter how good a closer you are because you ain't got anybody to meet with. So to an extent, it was just, feast or famine. To an extent, it was just, I have to figure out sales development, or else I don't actually sell anything, because again, we were still in this ISR full cycle rep model. And then beyond that, it was just a matter of taking a few steps back and seeing, well, did I learn everything that I needed to learn from this lead gen or sales development role to be able to set myself up to be closing quality business, right? And I just had a really great SDR manager pretty early on. And he imparted to me, like, look, don't worry about the title. Don't worry about, this ego or this narrative
Right.
that you're supposed to want to come in here and 6 months later be an AE. Understand that you have this opportunity, like nobody else in the building, to impact revenue, to impact pipeline, and understand how critically and how mission critical that is. And then just start to learn everything you can learn while the stakes are relatively low, right? Because it is an entry level position, so you're kind of free to make mistakes. So learn everything you can learn while the stakes are low, and then you'll just be applying those things for the rest of your career versus hurrying yourself to get to what? Some status, some title. And so then once that clicked, then it was just a matter of figuring out, well, what questions I had. And some of those questions that sort of led me into this top of funnel marketer / sales development person, or demand engine unto myself, as I like to think of it, was these questions about, well, where do leads come from, right? Which I know sounds like there should be a really simple answer for that, but often for SDRs, there isn't. Often for SDRs, it's like, oh, they came from the CRM. Oh, okay. They're in my MQL bucket, but what does an MQL even mean? Why am I calling these people at this time today? What is the trigger? And so I'm having these thoughts at the same time as the industry is kind of slowly understanding that we'll need to answer those questions for SDRs in order for them to be effective, because the market had been saturated with so many of the tactics that SDRs would use if they did not have that information. And then I found that a lot of that was cultural. A lot of the whole being an SDR, asking that kind of question and then being told, "Oh, don't worry about it, just dial."
Yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted to ask you. Do you feel like, is it on the person or the company? And it's not binary, right? It's not 100% zero one way or the other.
Sure.
Because the way that you're describing it, like you said, like you described, I'm my own demand gen person. How much of this do you think is cultural with the company versus cultural in terms of maybe how people think they should be working? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, because you got to take ownership over this, right? Like you took ownership over this, and I feel like it's a mix of both. At least this is what I see. I see people expecting the company to do for them versus the person saying, "Look, I'm going to do what I need to do to be successful," and the company should support me in that. But I'm also not just going to sit here and be like, "Well, the leads are." Whatever. So how do you know, right? Or like, how do you either have the conversation with leadership, or how did you kind of carve this out to where they trusted you to go and act a certain way, whereas maybe other people, didn't take that initiative? How do you think about that balance between you creating your own success and the company enabling it?
That's a really great question. The company did enable it. I do want to, though, make sure when I talk about culturally, I'm talking about as an industry.
Yeah.
So not specific to any company, but your question still rings true, right? Is it the industry or is it the individual? And what was helpful for me was I early on, again, in an SDR role, we reported to marketing. Yeah. And so I saw that the answers to a lot of those questions I was asking, and in terms of where do leads come from and what is the actual strategy, were questions that the marketing department could answer for me. But I also understood that wasn't going to be spoon-fed to me. And so a lot of it was just for my own sanity. I said this to myself, and I was doing the thing that a lot of folks do when they start to lack motivation in a sales development role. I wasn't hitting my activity metrics, which meant that I wasn't hitting my pipeline metrics. And that was the choice, right? I could sit there and be mad about it. And I was for a little bit.
Who are you mad at? Who are you mad at? When you think about the activity metrics, were you mad that they were unrealistic, or are you mad at yourself for, I guess, but maybe it's making excuse, you know what I mean? Like when you thought about that frustration, because I think this is important. A lot of salespeople, a lot of SDRs feel that frustration, and I think it's either an internal or an external or some mix. So when you were in that moment, where were you feeling the frustration?
Oh, 100%. I was taking it out on my poor SDR manager. And it was so not his fault, right? The man was just like, he's accountable for this dashboard, and he was lovely. But it was, a lot of it was before I had any kind of breakthrough was like, oh, he just wants me to do this and he doesn't understand. It was ego too, right? To understand how talented I am, because I had that frustration had been welling up for a long time, right? At Outbound Engine, of course, right? It's an ISR role. And so, and one of the sort of first of its kind in this full cycle B2B thing. And, there was 100 to 150 call expectation, right? For us to hit our number. But the questions I was asking were like, okay, so I know that my result was the same or more than the person sitting next to me, and I only had to make half the calls. There's a code to be cracked here, right? And certainly we're not just gonna be beholden to this number because it's what the person next to me has to do to get it. But even now when I say it, I can feel so much ego in that statement.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. So I needed to find a middle ground between being mad at these people who maybe hadn't cracked the code yet on who does and does not have to make 150 calls a day to get to the number. Like, why are we having to make that many calls? Does that mean there's something wrong? Maybe. And then being mad at myself for not understanding, well, hey, Nikki, if you do only have to make 75 calls to produce the same as this person, why wouldn't you make 150 calls to produce double? So I spent a couple of years back and forth with myself on which of those people I needed to be until, I sort of figured out through trial and error that it isn't, like you mentioned earlier, it isn't binary. There's some elements of one philosophy that will work, but what has to be there is the willingness to make that 150 calls if it's necessary. right?
How do you balance that? How do you balance reality versus ego? Because I think there's a lot of people that are listening to this, salespeople, that feel the exact same way. They've got some level of like, is this their fault? Is this my fault? Or maybe just how did you navigate that? So you had that scenario, right? 150 calls, you're making 75. Well, how did you solve? What was the solve for you? Because I think what I want everyone listening right now is to think about the conversation you might need to have with your boss. And I think a lot of people have this mindset that it just is what it is, and I'm just going to put up with it. And my boss, there's a 99% chance that your boss is not a bad person, that your boss wants you to be successful. To your point, your poor manager, he's got a dashboard, he's getting, screamed at because Nikki didn't make 150 dials, whatever. So how did you flip it, or how did you kind of work within the confines to find success and find that mix for yourself, regardless of what was imposed from the top?
Straight up, I got beat by people who I thought I was more talented than. That is a humbling experience. And then reality AF, right? So then it's like, look, are you more talented than them? Or is that talent as valuable as you might have thought it was? If they're beating you, like, maybe you're not that nice, kid. And maybe that's okay. Maybe this is the breakthrough. Maybe you've been resting on laurels. Maybe you've been achieving only what you could achieve based on the talent, and the work ethic hasn't caught up. Like, I just had to have a real talk with myself. And like you mentioned earlier, take ownership of it. And sure, there was blame to go around, but at the end of the day, it is nobody else's job. And it was nobody else was in my head. They can't read my mind. They don't really know what I need. Once I figured out, like, look, I don't have the same background, and I'm not as maybe relatable to some of the folks that might mentor me and be able to understand why this is such a obstacle for me. So there isn't a fixer. I'm just going to have to get over myself, develop some respect for the mechanics and the fundamentals of this job, and execute them, period.
So I think for a lot of people listening, my takeaway is this idea of self-reflection and this idea of reality. Mm-hmm. What do you feel leaders can do, or how can someone work with their leader to get there faster? I mean, obviously, it's like the classic, can I motivate someone, or can I just remove barriers, etc.? Like, were there any, tactics that your leader used to help pull this out or to help surface it, or was this all self-reflecting, or is there an exercise somebody can do to maybe just take stock of where they're at? Because look, to me, a leader's job is to help people work through things. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So, again, how did you think you performed? Oh, I crushed it. Well, then how does that measure up here? And kind of helping people with some of that. So was there like an exercise or something you think people can do to maybe just like self-assess? And maybe it's not something formal, but maybe it's something that you've done over your career that's been helpful.
I journaled, and I still have the journal. I should have made screenshots out of it.
I love it.
But it was, I hadn't hit my number, and I got reassigned to the worst territory at this company. And by worst, it was just one that was cold. No one had been calling into, I think it was Northern California. No one had been calling into that market. And so there weren't a lot of contacts that were engaged. And, but at the same time, this was what my SDR manager did. He was like, we're putting you on this territory, but we will double your percentage on closed pipeline that you source if you hit this number. And it was a higher number than I had ever been given. So every day I documented my activity. It made me feel better to be in control of it myself versus, feeling like I was trying to match up or live up to some dashboard.
Yeah.
I had to develop my own reasons for doing this work. This was the process by which I developed that respect for these, what some would call non-revenue generating or administrative, or even just the volume of activity that has to go out in this situation. And some days it'd be like arrived at 10:30 a.m. because I was working like a territory where, you work in California and you live in Austin.
Sure.
You got a couple hours buffer. And I was lazy sometimes. And so got in at 10:30 a.m., made 45 dials, 0 meetings. And then just look at it at the end of the day. And I would document what time I left as well. So I had to just stare at it. And then in this journal, you could see this progression of me just breaking it down to the micro, the unit economics, right, of what it would take for me to be successful in that role. And then I had my biggest quarter ever, my biggest commission check ever. And as they say, winning helps, right? Winning fixes a lot of stuff. And so once I saw that there is something to these unit economics, there is something to being intentional about this activity, and I will win. That's when I sort of got that chip off my shoulder as far as like, why do I have to do this? And why, like, someone's externally impressing upon me, imposing upon me this work versus these are the things that I want to do because they will get me the result that I want to have.
And I think leaders suck at this, if I'm just being candid. Like, I feel like it actually, I feel like with someone like you in particular, like you maybe could have got there faster. I feel like leaders just say, hey, the number's the number, and what I've seen consistently is as a leader, I've been able to get people to that level faster because it's just like, guys, look, let's just look at the math. Let's just look at the data over the last 3 months and like how many of these things we had to do to equal X outcomes. And then asking people to make the commits themselves. Okay, so based on this, how many MQLs or SQLs or SALs or whatever you call them do you think is reasonable? Well, I think I can get to 5. All right, well, let's shoot for 5 the next 2 weeks. What I've consistently found is people will pick higher targets than what you want. And if salespeople understand the why, if they just explain to the team how you got to that number, it should be based on fact, not fiction. You know what I mean? And I feel like so many leaders, it's kind of like a parent, right? And I'm sure you've been through this too. And I have my moments where I'm like, because I said so. Yeah. I'm like, just stop with all this, because I said so. And I feel like maybe in leadership, we take that approach a little bit versus, how we should have those conversations with our kids, which is, all right, well, tell me more. What do you think? What do you think what do you think your consequence should be? All that stuff. So I just feel like leaders, I want to put you on notice a little bit here too, that you will get buy-in faster from your team the more transparent you are. And I've always been a very transparent leader. And I've consistently found that it leads to people like Nikki getting behind a number faster. They get to pick it. They always pick a higher number. They get to understand why we have these minimums because you're just showing them the data.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that resonates with you at all, but that for me as a leader, I've always found a lot of success doing it that way.
Yeah, I think that's it. And not for nothing, right? I had some great leaders, right? Scott Leese among them. And I think in another, instance of just extreme ownership, I wasn't ready. There's a maturity level, right? I mean, you come from selling cars where there really isn't, it's kind of the Wild West, right? I mean, of sales culture, of what's expected. I mean, in that environment, it really is only about the income. You could smoke cigarettes out back all day, roll up, work for 3 hours, sell 2 cars in a day, and be a king out at that piece. And so I think to an extent, there was just an adjustment to the environment of B2B sales and an adjustment to, how sometimes a person has been in like a couple of toxic relationships and then they just don't know how to act when somebody is handing them something healthy. I feel like that's what happened with me that outbound engine coming from selling at Kia. It was just like, you're not going to yell at me or fire me because, I didn't do XYZ right. And, there was all of these things. I remember distinctly Scott sitting me down and saying like, I can feel you trying to punish yourself for not executing on this or that. And we don't do that here. It's not productive, he said to me. It is not productive to keep punishing yourself. But I still have some stuff to work through.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's fair. So we've got some questions starting to roll in. And I think a few of these I don't know. Maybe we'll get a little controversial. We'll see. So Mr. Cesar Cruz says, aside from being an AE, where can a high-performing SDR go? And I feel like this topic in the last 9 months is something that has been surfacing a lot. Maybe it's last year, maybe 9 months to a year, where people, I'm trying to think, like Colin Cadmus, there's a bunch of people who are like, don't make AE the goal. You can be a high-performing, sales development person. You can do other things. So are there other, and again, like, let's not talk fantasy land here. I mean, let's get real. Like, let's not talk like, well, you can be whatever, blah, blah. Like, are there skills that you feel like if someone doesn't want to be an AE, which I got to be honest, I get it. I've had people like this before. There's a guy, I'll just tell a quick story. I won't mention his name. In the interview process, this is at Glassdoor. We were hiring. We didn't have an SD team. Our reps are doing both full cycle to start with. And this guy had been a lifetime SDR, and he got so passionate. He cried during the interview process. This guy was so passionate about what we were doing. And I remember my manager's like, we got to hire this guy. We got to hire him. I'm like, dude, he cried during the interview process. Like, how is this going to work out? But anyway, long story short, he gets in the role. He's horrible at sales. But we then moved him to an SDR, and he was there for 5 years as a top SDR. 5 years, right? From literally like 2011 or 12 through like when they got acquired. And so I really believe that some people, that's the path. But I think that's the minority. I got to feel like most people are like, get me doing something more than this exact same thing over and over again. I feel like there's just a repetitiveness to the job that will just, man, it takes a special person to want to just keep doing that. So how do you think about that? How do you think about staying an SDR? Where can SDRs go outside of just making that move up to AE?
I think if we compensate SDRs like the professionals that we are, then I think you would probably see a lot more folks staying in that role, because for the reasons I mentioned before, right? It is a role that sits in this really interesting place between sales and marketing. You are daily engaging with, especially if it's a problem that you're passionate about solving.
Yeah.
Right? You're daily engaging with the people who are trying to solve that problem and living in that space if you're doing it right. So if you love it, I totally understand wanting to stay in that role. But to your broader question of where can SDRs go, I fully plan to be a CMO someday. And someday not that far in the future. Yep. And the skills I will be using are the elite SDR skill set, right? And whatever I build on top of that from now.
Yep.
Because as we talked about, right, if the way you approach the SDR role is to understand how to identify / generate / capitalize on demand, then that is transferable really into any department that you want to go into, right? So whether your team reports into marketing or not, I'm a huge fan of SDRs going into that role, because again, they've spent the last year or so engaging regularly with your ICP, with the problem you solve, with the product. Who as an outside hire is more likely to have that base of knowledge than your SDR team? If you're not pulling from them, I think it's a missed opportunity. And I think the same thing goes for CS. I think that's a huge missed opportunity. I don't know culturally if it's a part of what, because I have spent very little time with CS or with account management. I know those are two subtly different things, but I think that this proactive approach that an SDR might take to CS, that's not necessarily part of how that job is traditionally done. It seems to be more reactive. You apply that information and everything that an SDR has absorbed into that instance, and I think it's another opportunity. And then beyond that, I mean, there's SDR leadership. There's any number of places you could plug a person in who had that grit, that knowledge of your ICP, and that willingness to get in there and learn and do some of the things that other folks deem beneath them. We could do whatever we want as SDRs. I just think that the culture does push people, and it's two things. Like I said, it's the compensation that pushes folks into AE, because they're seeing AEs eat and they're not eating off meetings that they set off of closed deals that this person sourced that they don't get a piece of. So there's all these things that if we fixed those, the job wouldn't be as much of a grind and folks wouldn't be in such a hurry to get out of it. But then if they were, then they could enrich your organization in a more thorough way than they might if you treat them like just appointment setters.
Yeah, I mean, the marketing one for me is super interesting. One, Nikki CMO Ivey. I love it. I love that. But I think, what I want everyone to listen to, just to call this out, Nikki, because you talked about it earlier, maybe 15, 20 minutes ago. You're a student of the game. You're like, I need to go talk to marketing. I need to go across the aisle. I need to go and learn about marketing. You talked about this earlier, and I feel like enough people, you can't just sit around SDR and think you're just going to get picked for this CS job or get picked to go to marketing. To Nikki's point, you might have the deck a little bit stacked against you because of just perception. Fair or not, I don't know, right? Mm-hmm. And so I feel like this is just an important call out for everyone listening. If you want to go into marketing, you got to go make it happen. You need to go start to read the marketing books right now, not expect someone's just going to give you a shot in marketing or to be the next marketing manager or ABM, whatever. And so I feel like a lot of SDRs and AEs, for that example, they don't take their growth proactively enough. And then they just want new opportunities. No, I want to be in CS. I want to be in AM. I want to be in marketing. It's like, cool. Have you already started to become a marketer? Can you show me again, you refer to yourself as a demand generation engine, right?
Right.
And that's how you've got to think. If you want to move into marketing, that has to be your mindset. Right. That I need to go look at this holistically.
Makes everything else less of a chore. Right? I did not have, I hope very few people have an aspiration to be a LinkedIn sales star influencer guy. This was not on my list of self-actualization.
Sure.
What I wanted, though, was to find people who believe what I believe, right? Find people who were solving for the same problems that I was trying to solve for, and all to the end of generating business. And so, but sometimes though, and I think leaders have a huge role to play. Yes, I think you've made the case that it is certainly primarily a matter of like individual intentionality, right? Individual responsibility. You just got to get in there and understand what has to be done. But there are leaders like Kyle Coleman who, and now they're set up a little different at Clary. He runs revenue ops. And so SDRs are actually under his umbrella and they're not as segmented sales versus marketing as a lot of folks are. Sure. But it's important to him, and he's intentional about getting his SDRs opportunities to learn copywriting, getting his SDRs opportunities to do just like you said, and have sort of cross-team, cross-functional projects to work on. And the thing is, like, these projects don't have to mean, right? I'm an SDR. I do a project around a specific event, let's just say, with the marketing team, because I think that that's one of the cool entry points of SDR into marketing is around events. So I do that, and I learned I don't actually like it, right? And now I know, at least going forward, okay, I'll look at something else. I'll look at AE, I'll look at CS. But to wait until, you leave to a different company or whatever it is really, you're setting yourself up for failure. So I do think that leaders can be creative and intentional about finding opportunities for SDRs to learn and leverage skills that are a bit broader than the typical SDR tasks might ask of them.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, leaders have to leave the door open a little bit. And I think then you as an individual have to be intentional, about what that move is, Oh, yeah. Like, again, if you're a leader, right, and someone comes to you, I'm going to give you two scenarios. Someone comes and says, look, so as I think about my career, marketing is a key element of that. Here are the top 3 reasons why I want to do X, Y, Z, et cetera. What I'd like to do, I've actually, have a conversation with marketing about this. What I'd like to do is X, Y, Z. Person number 2. Yeah, no, marketing's interesting. Yeah, no, I wouldn't mind doing a project.
Oh, sure.
Dude, yeah, how can I help you? I can't help you as a leader. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's too many people are they're not helping themselves. So, all right, Jeffrey Ernst. What's up, Jeff? I don't know if you go by Jeff or Jeffrey. I feel like you don't see as many Jeffreys anymore.
You don't.
Yeah. Yeah, my stepdad's named Jeff. All right. What was the mindset when you didn't hit your target? Everything seems like a number. And if you didn't hit your number, leaders look to those who did. How do you stay motivated? So you've had a bad month. You've had 2 bad months. Maybe you had a bad quarter. What have you done successfully to stay positive, to stay motivated, to stay in the zone versus, letting yourself get, pulled into negativity?
So one of them is the thing I mentioned before, which was journaling. That was really helpful for me. I still do it today. Not as consistently as I would like, but I still do that today. But that's, coming from this broader idea of just being really honest with myself. So, I really don't know how else to put it other than just paying attention to what it is that I'm trying to accomplish and staying on track to an extent, right? And I think along with what someone called talent, those are things that just have to exist inside you. And it's okay. It's okay if you find that doesn't exist inside you for this profession or for this role. You just have to be ready to receive that information. I think the fact that, I guess one of the things that helped me is I did approach that whole journaling exercise with an attitude of curiosity.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure by the time I got to the end of it that I would find that B2B tech sales was for me. I wanted that to be the outcome, but more than I wanted to force either outcome, I wanted to know what I'm made of and what makes me happy and what I can sustain over time. And so again, just approaching every day, every interaction with that level of curiosity was another part of flipping the switch, and then giving yourself, finding places to give yourself a higher purpose than the money for the role.
Yeah.
When I was given that California territory and it was one that everybody hated, I absolutely had a goal to make everybody wish they had that territory.
Yeah.
Like,
I think you have to.
I had to, right? And so that was this higher purpose thing. And it wasn't just the people I was on the team with then. I was like, when I am long gone from this place, if somebody wants to have a conversation with somebody about home healthcare and hospice software in Northern California, they will see my name in some activity on that contact from the year 2015 and 16, because I warmed this up. I shook the ground in this place.
I love it. So there's this like desire, or just like, hey, I'm going to persevere. It sounds like journaling really helped you to just kind of like stay disciplined, stay the course.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think, for me, when this has happened, or when I've had reps that have hit, kind of a tough time, etc. I feel like most of the time,
Mm-hmm.
and this is probably right, most of the time, it's because they lost track of the plan.
Yep.
It's they said, I know everyone else is doing ABC. I am God's gift here. I am Johnny Smith, and I'm going to go and do it this way. And I had a leader when I was 26, right? I'll never forget this. So I was started at Career Builder. I think we had 9 people in our training class. I was the second to last person. I hadn't closed anything. And I'm like, what is happening? I'm Jake Dunlap. I was like the man in sports sales. I like destroyed it. And I come to this company and I'm sucking. I'm like, what is going on? And I remember my director listened to my call and he goes, Jake, why aren't you following the script? Like, the script, Nikki. Script and activity metrics, those are for the peasants, right? Like, I am here. And he goes, dude, do you think we're stupid? He goes, do you think we train 1,000 salespeople on something that doesn't work? And I was like, no. Okay, that logically, that doesn't make a ton of sense. And then I closed 60,000 in new business the next month. And it was the biggest light bulb moment for me. When I see people stray, they're usually just not following the process.
Or
the process. Yeah.
It's on the other end of the spectrum.
Could be.
I lied to myself that I was doing everything.
Right, exactly.
That's what I saw a lot of my colleagues. They're in there and they're one-on-one with the SDR manager, and the SDR manager's like, well, why are we not tracking toward the number? I don't know. I'm making my calls. I'm doing this. But you know that like, maybe you hit your 50 dial number that day, but you did it for the dashboard, fam. Like, let's be real.
Exactly.
And
you were calling those fake ass numbers. I see you.
And
I know what you're
were
doing.
phoning it in. And you know that when you did get somebody on, you're going to say something because you know the calls are in chorus. So you better actually say the script, but you just said the script and you didn't mean it and you didn't say it with conviction. And maybe that's okay because you couldn't muster up the conviction. Because for nothing, another answer to the question of what did I do when I was in a rut, therapy. I'm gonna leave it at that. But like, take care of yourself because it can be really, really like daunting when you feel boiled down to a number and then you don't hit that number. It's like a whole existential crisis. But so, no, for real though. But so
I
like,
believe it.
so like beyond all of that, like if you're telling yourself that you're doing every single thing, you are adhering to the process and it's still not working, chances are like you have a blind spot or there is just some bit of you that is still just not willing to accept it. This saying that they used to say a lot when I was in car sales, some will, some won't, so what? Sometimes you can put out all of the activity that you're supposed to put out and it won't yield the number, but that is not your excuse to stop doing the activity. It's just not. But yeah, I was feeling sorry for myself in a car lot, and this they call him an old car dog. Gentleman that was like in his 50s, had been doing this a long, had smoked a lot of cigarettes and sold a lot of Kia Souls. He saw me after I didn't make the sale and got completely chewed out in front of everybody because that was the culture at this dealership. And there was a little Post-it note on my desk and he wrote SW, SW, SW. And I just looked up at him. What does it mean, Mr. Color Dog Man? And he was just like, some will, some won't, so what? Like, do not kill yourself over this stuff. If you really have done everything that you can then that is, comforting. And it's motivating too. Because now you're not attached to that.
You hit it on the head. It's do you feel like you left it all on the table? And I feel like that's it. So, again, Jeff, when you're thinking about this, like, you've got to just be, again, you cannot be great. And it's just not sales or sales development, it's anything, if you're not willing to be self-reflective. And then as you get stronger, being able to detach who you are from the outcomes and being able to examine yourself and what happened without passing judgment on yourself. Yeah. And I feel like that when you make that leap, when you can open up the skeletons in your closet and not pass judgment, that's when it's over. Like, you can't be stopped because I can now assess myself faster. There's no way that a leader can assess you and make micro changes as fast as you can do it yourself. For sure. But if you're not willing to listen to yourself, et cetera, and really be honest with yourself about it, then you can't get better faster. And so what I like about Jeff's question, your answer, is just this idea that you just have to be able to self-assess. And I just don't think you can be great without it. I don't think it's possible. I really, really don't think it's possible if you can't get over your own ego to bust out of that slump, because you're going to be blaming everybody else.
You got to do it over and over again, over a lifetime, over a career, right? It's like getting, whatever your spirituality is, right? But it's like getting saved, right? It's not like you get saved and then you never sin again. That is the vast majority of people. That's not the case, right? You decide, yes, this is the way I want to go. This is the outcome I want, but you will fall. And if you live in that feeling of what it's like after you have fallen, you will never get up. And then if you can't forgive yourself, sometimes it's much harder for folks that have made this profession, right? Or this assertion saying, I am going to go this direction and go and sin no more. Because now there's the shame of, I'm supposed to be saved. I can't be messing up. There's all this parallel for me with like deciding, all right, I'm going to be really self-reflective. I'm going to journal. Well, that person hits quota every time and that person always comes through. And sometimes I'm not that person. So then I have to realize that it's time to do this again and again. And you just have to, what's the Will Smith? You just got to be willing to die on the treadmill, right? You just got to be like, I'm just not going to stop self-reflecting.
Yeah, I think that hopefully people take that time. You make a call, it doesn't go well, sit with it for a few minutes. Okay, what happened? And that's what, yeah, that actually reminded me of it's another story I was going to tell about. Again, same time period, I was probably 26, 27. And for me, what happened, I got to the end of a call. I was the full cycle too, set my own meetings, close my own deals, and then even manage my own and grow my own accounts. That was how I was set up at Career Builder. And I was at the very end of a call. And I know how to end the meeting. I know how to push for next steps. I know when someone says, Jake, this is really interesting, can you send me some information? They're really saying F off, right? Like, I knew this, but I'll never forget. There's this guy, I don't remember anything other thing, but I do remember this event very distinctly. We get to the end of the call, I'm doing it all. I'm crushing this thing. And then at the end, he goes, yeah, Jake, this is really interesting. Can you send me some information? And I go, yeah, okay, Kevin, sounds good. And then, yeah, maybe we can circle back. And I'm like, I remember hanging up the phone and being like, you little, what is wrong with you? I'm like, dude, you know what to do. And I made a deal with myself at that point. I will never, ever, ever, ever hang up the phone and know that I left something on the table, like that I'm willing to not make someone else discomfort so then I can beat myself up. So I just made a commitment to myself. And since that point, and I read this book at the same time. It's called How to Make People Like You in 90 Seconds or Less. And it talks about these priming mechanisms. For me, it's like a light switch. Like, I can now kick it into gear when I know what's coming. I flip the switch and I just lean in. And I feel like everybody needs to, you don't have to have that level of like self-reflection, but you gotta be willing to get uncomfortable. If you're going to be great, if you're going to be really, really good, you got to be willing to get uncomfortable, and you've got to be willing to be consistent. And that's it for me. I will never hang up the phone knowing that I chose to not do something as opposed to make somebody uncomfortable. And that's when I realized, like, look, if you don't want to make people uncomfortable, you better quit sales right now, because that's the job. If it was called information giving, I'd pay you $25,000 a year. But it's not. It's called sales. And I think too many people get it twisted that the job is information giving. Same thing with the SDR, right? My job isn't to overly educate. My job is to book a qualified meeting, So anyway, I'm just like preaching at this point, but
the choir though.
You gotta go make it happen. All right. So we got one last question here. Everyone, thank you, Nikki. This is fun. It's already been 52 minutes.
It's crazy.
I know, right? It's good though, but this is a good talk. I think this is one we'll definitely chop up. We'll put it on YouTube. We'll do some clips around, because I feel like this is a lot of really good advice for individuals here, for leaders. So I'm excited about this. So Neil's question here, he's a lead sales development rep. How valuable are SDR's roles in relation to brand recognition, positive impressions, overall experience, etc.? So how do you think about the SDR as transcending just, here's what I'm supposed to do, and being this kind of public face as well?
That's the next frontier. If you're a brand and you're at all interested in increasing awareness, increasing your bona fides as thought leaders, you have to be leveraging your SDR team. And by leveraging, I mean empowering them to be thought leaders in and of themselves, but doing that around the problem that you solve, and in a genuine way that these individuals can put their own voice on, right? What I'm not talking about is making them share your company LinkedIn page's post. That's not how we get there. So to an extent, it's a culture thing. If your employees are as engaged as they need to be, then it's not a chore. They're excited to talk about the problem that they solve. And then all you have to do is just teach them how to use Sales Navigator to find and connect with people who are in your ICP, who are also concerned with this problem that your SDR and your company are passionate about. And then help them with the messaging, or help them with maybe more of the positioning than the messaging. And then just encourage and empower them. That is the next one. That's how you become a demand engine unto yourself. You get to a point where you've connected with the right folks. right? That fit your ICP, and some of the who are you won't sell to, but who are just thought leaders in the space. So you know who the people you want to sell to are listening to. And then you optimize that individual SDR or salesperson's LinkedIn profile to be sort of a landing page, not for the company necessarily, but certainly for passion around the problem that you solve.
So good. Yeah, I love that, right? Passion for the problem that you solve, the outcomes that you produce. And I mean, I just feel like if I was an SD, I mean, again, now you're going to be like, Jake, no, it's not that easy, but I feel like I would just crush everybody because that's what I would do. Every day I would connect with 50 new people in my industry. I'd put out a post that's about outcomes that get produced, and it's not all scaled.
Mm-hmm.
And after doing that for about 45 days, it would just be over. Because I would be liking and commenting on your stuff. I'd be DMing you a video message in LinkedIn because you're a first degree connection. And I would just crush these people. I would crush the people who are doing this stuff mindlessly. And then I'll layer in some calls on top of it. Hey, you know what, Nikki? Hey, I saw this post. I thought it'd be good to reach out. It's that omni-channel. I feel like this stuff everyone is telling, I feel like SDRs and salespeople the same thing. We're all telling them this, but people are struggling with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because I think they misunderstand what it means to build a brand, which is essentially, and I've heard more talk about this. I think I've heard you say this, right? All you're doing is taking control of your reputation.
That's exactly it.
And then you are building capital in the relationships that you build and leveraging it to the benefit of you, your company, and your buyer. Who says no to that? People when they say no, they're not saying no to that. They're saying no to posting every day for no reason, they think, saying the same thing that everybody else is saying, they think. But if you sell, let's say in a crowded space, and you think there's already somebody talking about this problem this way, well, then just think more deeply about why people say yes to you, your company, and when they do say yes to you over this competitor who's already talking about the problem in a certain way, then talk about the problem in a way that differentiates you.
Or talk about it the same because there's two people. Oh, big deal. Because Kevin Smith is already posting on something. You think he owns all the market share?
Listen, I tell people this all the time, Jake, if Mariah Carey had said, well, Whitney Houston's already singing songs. You know what I'm saying? Then I would never have gotten Always Be My Baby.
Yeah, there you go.
We would never have gotten Mariah's Unplugged, which is one of the best unplugs that ever existed. Right?
I love it.
You have to, if that analogy, right? If the Beach Boys were the Beatles exist, guess we won't ever make some of the greatest love songs of all time. Nah, there's somebody out there that wants to hear from just you, that can relate to the way that you solve the problem and is waiting to just be found. But they won't find you if you're not presenting yourself, if you're not visible. So yes, get out there and do it. And if you're leading a team, whether you're, the VP of sales or the SDR leader or whatever it is, right? Find ways. There are platforms and there are frameworks to set your team up for success as far as that goes, right? Work with your marketing team, figure out what top of funnel messages are out there that they're trying to advance, that they can get on one accord with your SDR team about, and then see how you supercharge getting that message out there.
It exists. And again, I think that's a good point to end on. Your marketing team has probably created a lot of really good content, but it's up to you to repurpose it. It's up to you to kind of breathe some life into it, and that's some of the easiest way. So Nikki, I appreciate you. It was good. Let's do this again. Let's do this again in some point and over the next month before the end of the year for sure. And then where are you living now? You're not in Austin, right? You moved.
I am not in Austin. I am just outside Jacksonville, Florida.
All right. What caused the move? You're just done with Austin. Can't take it.
I don't think I'll ever be done with Austin. Austin is my town. I grew up an Army brat, so having Austin feel more like home than any other place is special. A lot of it, my husband was from Nebraska and had never seen the ocean until we met, until he was a grown-up. And then once he saw it, he was like, someday I want to live there. So now it's someday.
I love that. I love that though. That's awesome. Well, we'll get into that too. I was born in Iowa. My brother was born in Nebraska, so we can get into that whole
Oh
Midwest
yeah. We
thing
were
as well
to
too.
talk about the Chiefs win.
That's right. That's right. Look, it wasn't pretty, but we came out with it.
Well, Travis
Right.
Kelce was pretty. Damn.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, exactly.
he's my boyfriend.
But
He doesn't know it yet, but it's fine.
I think he's a lot of people's boyfriend. Kill a Trav. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in this Wednesday. Doing a quick session with Matt Cameron. If you don't know Matt runs a really successful sales training business. And then, as always, Fridays 8:30 Central. Tune in the recap. I don't know what genre of music I'm going to do. I found a really good. I did Tupac. Finding a really good edited Tupac list is not easy. Nikki.
Not easy, but I think I like your taste of music. Listen, if you guys aren't following Jake on Instagram, first of all, what are you doing? One of your stories, this is a little creepy, I don't know. But anyway, one of your stories, it was like you were playing some hit from Jagged Edge's third album, and I was like,
yes.
what do you know this Jake Dunlap knows about Jagged Edge?
Oh, you don't know. You just don't know. You don't know. I was a 90s R&B. I've seen Keith Sweat in concert 3 times. I've seen a lot of 90s. Man, I don't know what it was. Me and my friends, just imagine like a team of like guy basketball players, right? Mm-hmm. We were just into R&B. I don't know what it was.
I mean, it was great music.
5 dudes going to New Edition, Blackstreet, Keith Sweat, 702. It's like just 5 dudes just rolling in. Don't know what we were doing. So,
I love
all right, everyone. I know. Look, hey, you like what you like. I'm into it. So appreciate you, Nikki. Appreciate everyone. Have a great rest of your week. And again, big thank you, Nikki. A lot of awesome stuff here.
Thanks, Jake. This was fun.
All right. Take care, everybody.